Hello, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. I'm Anna. This is where I talk about the books that I'm reading. Happy New Year, happy 2024. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling very good about this year. Since it's the new year, I'm sharing my favorite books of 2023 with you today. I'm still fighting off a cold, and also I woke up with a stiff neck today, so if I seem a bit tense and immobile, it's because I am. Yeah, 2023, I had such an amazing reading year. For some reason I picked really good books to read in 2023. So since I read so many great books, I thought today I would focus on the books that I actually rated 5 stars on Goodreads. So there are 5 books that I would like to discuss today, and then also at the end I'm including 2 books that I only rated 4 stars, but that I wanted to be included in the video because they felt very special to me. Right. I put the books into chronological order, which means we're starting from the beginning. The first book I read in the beginning of last year, and this is a book that was heavily featured on 2022 favorite lists, but I only read it last year, so I'm including it now. It's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Actually, I had my copy signed because I went to a reading that Gabrielle held. Yeah, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I'm sure you've heard so much about this already, but this is a novel that features 2 characters called Sam and Sadie, and they bond over their love for video games. They meet at a hospital when they're both children in the 1980s. Then they kind of lose sight of each other, and then they re-meet. And they still share this love for computer games, and they actually start producing their own games quite successfully. What I liked about this book is this is a book about love and about relationships, but it's not about romance. It's about friendship and how friendship can also be, you know, the love of your life. I also enjoyed how the friendship group kind of interacted between Sadie, Sam, and then there's a character named Marks as well, and how other relationships in their respective lives also influenced their friendship. So yeah, definitely a book about relationships, about friendship. What I also enjoyed is that Gabrielle Zevin, and I think she does this so well, touches upon aspects of race, class, gender, disabilities, and she does it in such an organic way that it doesn't read like, you know, a woke testament or anything, but yeah, as I've said, it reads quite organically, and she just knows how to incorporate all these identity markers into her characters without it being kind of like a teachable moment or something. I think this is really the highlight of the book, the characters. I felt so close to them. I felt like I was part of the group. This is also why at some point I had to cry like a little baby. And I couldn't stop for half a day at least. This book really broke my heart, but I love books that break my heart, so it's fine. Also, I told Gabrielle that she made me cry. She didn't seem sorry about it, to be honest. I think I would recommend this to people who enjoyed reading John Green books when they were younger, which includes me. I feel like this is a grown-up version of a John Green book without the pick-me girl character. So yeah, if John Green is part of your reading history, maybe give this one a go. Also, we have Shakespeare references, which of course will have my heart, you know. Yeah, if you haven't read this yet, pick it up. You won't be disappointed. You don't have to be into video games to like this. This is a great book that you can give to a friend. I feel like a lot of people with different reading tastes would really get something from this and enjoy it. The next book on the list is actually an audiobook that I listened to also in the beginning of the year. It's called What Happened to You, and it is written by Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey. Bruce D. Perry is a psychologist, I think, and Oprah Winfrey, of course, is Oprah. And yeah, as you can probably tell, this was a non-fiction book, and it is a non-fiction book about trauma. Fun times. This book kind of looks at trauma from a different perspective, because instead of asking what happened, it asks what happened to you. So it focuses more on, you know, the external factor that kind of puts the trauma into a person. That could be, you know, war or child abuse or whatever. And what I really liked about this is that it was super accessible. So usually a book or a non-fiction book about trauma might not, you know, be something that you quickly pick up and start reading. But since this was written from two perspectives, from a scientific perspective, but also Oprah included personal stories of guests that had been on her show. The mixture made it very accessible, because you had this very emotional, personal account, and then you had the scientific explanation or analysis. And I felt like this was a great combination to kind of, delve into the topic and also, you know, understand what is actually going on in a brain, for example, whilst trauma happens or when trauma has happened. So I thought this was a very good combination of, you know, two different sides. It also worked very well as an audiobook, because the chapters had a good length, and also both authors are narrating the audiobook, and it feels like they're having a conversation rather than someone, you know, reading a text to you. So I highly recommend listening to the audiobook. This also worked very well as an audiobook, because both authors are actually narrating the book. So it felt like you were listening to a conversation rather than to someone, you know, reading a text. And again, I feel like this made it quite accessible. So maybe if you're interested in the topic of trauma, this is a good starting point. It definitely gave me a lot of insight into the topic, and I also took a few notes. So yeah, highly recommend. Please make sure to look up the content warnings for this one before you read it, because of course there'll be a lot of heavy topics included. Okay, speaking of heavy topics, my third favorite book this year, last year, was Joan Didion, The Year of Magical Thinking. I'm not sure if you can read this. It's written in gold letters. Yes, a book about death and grief. I picked this up in Copenhagen when I went on a little trip with my friend Helen, and she actually recommended this to me, and I'm so glad that she did. In this very short book, Didion is dealing with the death of her husband, the sudden death of her husband, and then also the death of her daughter within the same year. And what I liked most about this book is that Didion really encapsulates how mundane yet special grief is, and how grief shows up in these normal day-to-day situations, and yet how extraordinary these moments can feel. Also, this really sealed the deal for me of being a Didion girly and identifying as a Didion girly. I had already read her novel, Play It As It Lays, but I had never actually read any of her nonfiction work. So I think also this was a great first read when it comes to her nonfiction work, and I will definitely continue my journey with her. And I can definitely see how this is considered a modern classic. As I've said, if you are dealing with these issues in your life or are interested maybe in how grief shows up in someone's life and how someone deals with these very special but tragic occurrences, definitely give this one a read. All right, next up, probably my favorite book of the year. If I had to pick one, it would be this one. Unfortunately, I lent my copy to a friend, so I don't have it here, but I will put a little picture up. It's Penance by Eliza Clark. I feel like a lot of people read Penance this year, and it was one of the most anticipated books of the year, and I feel like everyone loved it, which I know why. This is a book for the former true crime girlies, which I definitely am. I used to be obsessed with true crime and true crime podcasts and documentaries and all that stuff. This is also for the former Tumblr girlies, which again, I am. If you were chronically online when Tumblr basically ruled the internet, I'm pretty sure you will enjoy this. Penance is about a girl who's being murdered by her school friends. It is set in a decaying beach town somewhere in Yorkshire. It very much focuses on aspects of class. It includes politics at the time. It features a storyline very much connected to Brexit. Yeah, it's a lot. And I know I mentioned this before, but setting is such an important thing for me when I read a book, and I love when the setting kind of, becomes this additional character. And I feel like in Penance, this decaying sea town at a very specific time definitely is like a character itself. Like I said, this girl is being murdered by her school friends, and there's nothing that I like more than girlhood being portrayed in its brutality by using some type of metaphor or something very harsh, for example, murder in this case, to show how brutal adolescents and especially female adolescents can be. When I started reading this, I instantly knew that it would be a 5-star read for me, and usually I'm not wrong about these things. I felt so connected to the story and so connected to Clark's writing. Also, as I've said before, this is for the former true crime girlies because it is a novel within a novel, because we follow different perspectives and different characters, but we follow this man who is writing a novel about this case of the girl that gets murdered, basically. So we have this novel within a novel. And we not only have this embedded story, this story within a story, but there are other aspects of structure that Eliza Clark makes use of that I really enjoyed. This is an epistolary novel where you have different forms of text correspondence. It includes Tumblr posts, it includes text messages, emails, I think diary entries. So another aspect that I definitely enjoyed and that kind of added to the richness of the text, I would say. I will definitely read this again in the near future. After reading Penance, I also read Boy Parts, which I hadn't read until that point, which I also enjoyed, but I'm very glad that I read Penance first. And finally, and this is where we can kind of detect a theme to my favorite reads this year, because again, this is a book for the former true crime girlies, and I specifically remember listening to an episode of My Favorite Murder on this case. It is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. This I would call a feminist reimagination of the last murders that were committed by Ted Bundy. But this is very much not about Ted Bundy, and that is what makes this book so great. Because I'm so happy that we finally arrived at a point where we no longer focus on these men who do horrible things and not glamorize or romanticize them, which, by the way, is a huge theme in Penance. But I'm so happy that we now focus on the women that were attacked, on the victims, and not, no longer subscribe to this narrative of the evil genius, because we don't need more information on Ted Bundy and how he was so charismatic and how he could lure all these women into, his fantasies and blah, blah, blah. No. We're focusing on the women, and that's exactly what Jessica Knoll does in this book. So this is about the sorority that was attacked by Ted Bundy. And again, we have two narratives or two timelines. The first timeline is 1978, when the sorority is attacked and is written from the perspective of Pamela. And then the second timeline is 1974, and it's narrated by a character named Ruth, and she kind of deals with her best friend going missing and being murdered. Like I said, it focuses on these women and how they are dealing with being attacked by a serial killer. Because it focuses on the women and it is told from their perspectives, this was such an emotional read for me because I really connected to them. And also I was so engaged because I felt like I was, kind of part of the group, and I wanted to, do something and help somehow. So I was super engaged with the text. This is a very, emotional read. It's a very enraging read. I was so mad most of the time as well, because it definitely touches upon, all the injustice that occurred at that time. Also, the title is a reference to one of the judges, or the judge that finally sentenced Ted Bundy, and said, "Oh, you're such a bright young man. I'm so sad to, waste your potential," which is, a narrative that we still find today. But that's the reference to bright young women, because it's not only this bright young man who's kind of, throwing away his life, which he does, it's also these bright young women that have something taken from them. And therefore their lives are kind of ruined. As you can tell, I'm getting worked up talking about this. What Jessica Knoll does really well with her writing is she depicts these very mundane scenes and aspects of the story that punch you in the gut. So many times I had to stop reading because it was just one or two sentences, but I was like, oh my God, you're right. Again, if you were a true crime girly and you always felt, icky about the way they focus on these evil geniuses, on these serial killers and how they are being romanticized, read this. This is a good counterpart, I would say. So those were my 5 favorites, all of them being rated 5 stars. As I've mentioned in the beginning of the video, I would like to include 2 books that felt so special to me this year and that I would include in a favorites video, but you know, they're not the top of the top. But still, I would like to briefly touch upon them. The first one is The Guest by Emma Cline. Some of you may know that Emma Cline's The Girls is one of my favorite books of all time. This is a novel about Alex, who I think she loses her job and gets kicked out of her apartment. And then she stays with this older man in Long Island during the summer. But then he kind of gets bored of her and wants to take her back to the city, which of course she cannot go back. So she kind of drifts around Long Island. She manipulates people to let her stay with them. This is a very uncomfortable read. A lot of people say that nothing really happens in this book, but I would not agree with that. I think a lot actually happens. It feels like this roller coaster. This book had me so stressed. It was so stressful because she makes all these decisions that are so unsure and unsafe and give her no safety whatsoever. And I was so stressed for her the whole time, but I think that's why I was so engaged with the text and I had a very lively time reading this. So yeah, if you're looking for a book that has you stressed with great writing, because Emma Cline her writing is fantastic, this might be the book for you. And finally, also tying in with the theme of the brutality of girlhood, I read Brutes by Dizz Tate. How pretty is this cover? This is about a girl that goes missing. She's the preacher's daughter. It is set in Florida during the summer. The heat radiates from the page. It really adds to this feeling of stress and hopelessness, I would say, because everyone is looking for this girl and no one knows where she is. On the back it says, where is she, where is she, where is she? And this is the question that all the characters keep asking themselves throughout this book, which kind of feels like this prayer that is being said over and over again. This has been compared to The Virgin Suicides, which I would definitely agree with because it is written from the perspective of the other girls that are kind of wondering about this girl Sammy that went missing. And also these girls might actually know a little bit more than they tell us. As I've said, the brutality of girlhood being portrayed in metaphors. This has an aspect to it that I don't want to spoil, but this is so much more than you think, and this goes so much further than just a girl going missing. This is definitely a book if you're into weird stories. It really keeps you on your toes. This is a great summer read, so I would recommend, if you pick this up, read this during summer. So yeah, these are it. These are my favorites of 2023. I'm really hoping for another good reading year. I am confident because the first book that I finished yesterday was already a 5-star book. It was The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. So just to briefly mention this kicked off my reading year and I'm super happy that it did with such a bang. So another recommendation. Otherwise, I hope you got some inspiration